What's up, guys? Today's video we're going to talk about the 3 most important habitat features you could add on your property. Some are easier than others, but these will get you going in the right direction, not only to attract deer and hold deer for longer periods of time, but also be able to kill deer. I'll also list these in order of importance. Number 1 is to timber harvest your property. When you start cutting your property and creating that thick cover, this will not only attract deer, but it'll be able to hold deer for longer periods of time. What I've found though is that most landowners, when I go to consulting on their property, they do not want to cut the timber, and they're missing the boat here. I always try to encourage it if it's needed, but when you start cutting that timber, you give the deer a reason to be there, because deer like security, right? So when they walk into a piece of property and have that thick cover, they consider it security and safe place to be, as long as it's not pressured. You can evaluate your property, which you guys can check a video out, because I have a series on YouTube about evaluating your property and so forth. But there's several methods here. You can flush cut trees, you can hinge cut trees, you can hack and squirt trees. I'm for all 3 of those methods. It just depends what trees and what method is appropriate for your area. I'm not against either one. Every single one of these has a place. Not only with creating that thick cover, this creates woody browse regeneration in your property, and woody browse is the backbone to all healthy deer herds. So in the wintertime, you get the woody browse regeneration, which this will feed deer for many months out of the year, way more than a food plot actually can. Another important part of this is when I say cut timber, hinge cut or whatever, it depends on the size of property that you have. Now, this will lead into the number 2 habitat project you can do, but number 1 still is cutting that timber. On smaller pieces of property, I don't necessarily recommend cutting the timber. I'm referring to, let's say, 10 acres or less. Most cases, it doesn't benefit you to cut that timber depending on what's around. Now again, this is all property dependent. That's a general scenario. The smaller the property, the least I recommend cutting the timber. Now the bigger the piece of property, the more I generally recommend cutting the timber. It is so powerful when you start cutting it. In strategic areas, you got to have a plan when you do this, but it's very beneficial, not only for the woody browse regeneration, food value, but the cover aspect, because the bigger the property, the more you can hold those deer for longer periods of time, the more predictable deer movement you can have, and this will transition into number 2. Number 2 habitat feature, which is next important, is a quality food plot program. Most people, when they plant food plots, they don't have a program per se. I talk about this many times on my YouTube channel, is a quality food plot program. Having a quality food plot program means that you have something green and growing within those food plots 365 days a year, because when they go dormant, they're still improving the soil, and then the following year you can improve on it. So what you plant this year always benefits you next year. I've said this 1,000 times on my channel, but have that program. The size of the plot determines, a lot of times when the deer will use it. If it's a larger plot, that may be more of a nighttime feeding area, destination plot. The smaller food plot may mean that it gets used more during the daylight, but it also depends where it's located on your property and where the cover is, which is what I stated in the first step in improving your property. Is if you have that food plot relatively close to food, then it creates more of a predictable deer movement and increases daylight activity. Also, when you have that food relatively close to bedding, say 100 yards, 200 to 300 yards, then you create huntable transitions where you can intersect the deer between bedding and food. Then when that situation happens on your property, you start getting into a very powerful property that attracts deer and holds deer for longer periods of time. Number 3 in this is a good access program to your stands, food plots, bedding areas that you're hunting in, which I guess we could argue that this is actually the most important. They're all important, but this is just a list I came up with in order of importance right now. But having that area, an area around your property that you can use to access deer based on wind direction, where the deer are, where the deer are bedding, food plots. How can you get to those spots without spooking deer? Most times, in general terms, I like to have access around the perimeter of the property. That way I can cut in toward the center of the property to hunt. I'm hunting the edges, food plots. I have barricades set up in front of them, maybe hinge cut areas, or stackable trees that I've cut, pushed up in a certain area to where I can access that stand up and down. Deer can be in the plot. I can leave, walk through a non-deer area around that perimeter, back to my vehicle, house, whatever it is, however it's set up. When all three of these occur on your hunting property, you become the most attractable, huntable property in the neighborhood. All three of these have to occur. Most times, in general terms, you create a attraction to your property, a safe area for your property for deer to be. All right guys, thanks for watching. Any questions, leave a comment down below. Give this video a watch right here and subscribe over here if you guys are new to the channel. Appreciate your view. Happy holidays.